Hey everyone, Yulia for Expression here, and welcome back to our community events where we help you learn more about journey mapping and CX in general from industry experts. Expression is an online collaborative tool that can help you visualize your customer journeys, create personas and network maps, and invite teammates to collaborate with you in real time. With that, let's get started.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today. I'm really happy to see this level of this big crowd here with us. And as Yulia was mentioning, we're going to be sharing our understanding of our experience developing an understanding of employee journey and employee experience at Macadamian. When we started this work, there were certain initiatives in place to kind of gather employee experience and understand employee experience, but we didn't have a baseline understanding of what that overall employee journey kind of looks like. So we decided to go ahead with this project, and let's look at what we'll cover. So as we start, we're just gonna be first giving you a bit of an introduction of ourselves. So our background, what we do, then we will give you a bit of an introduction on Macadamian, and also kind of provide you some more context on what the project is about. And then we'll do a deep dive into the specific case study. So how we got started, how we captured the data, what methods we used, how we documented all the insights, and then not only just documenting the insights, but using those insights to take action. So how did we use these insights to co-create with our stakeholders and have an impact through our research? So yeah, let's get started. So I kind of want to give a bit of introduction to myself. I'm a UX researcher. I've been doing research for approximately 3 years now, but this is not how I started my career. So my background is in engineering, and I worked as an application support analyst for around 2.5 years. And then I decided to move to Canada to pursue engineering management because I wanted to learn something new, try out a different field. And I was pretty embedded in the program. And once I kind of graduated from that program, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I kind of had this crisis moment, and I started exploring different fields. And through my journey of exploring different disciplines, I eventually discovered my passion for UX and UX research specifically. So I decided to go back to school to study human-centered design. And at the same time, I started my career as a researcher as well. So I've worked at Shopify, which is an e-commerce platform, worked in a product company as a researcher. I've worked at Macadamian for, I would say, around almost 1.5 years. And at this stage today, I'm moving on to a new opportunity. So I am starting another opportunity today. But overall, I've been in this space for around 3 years. I'm going to pass it on to Yene to give an introduction as well.
Thank you, Simran. And first, I would like just to say thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm very happy to share what we learned during our research. And okay, about myself. So I have been working with the UX for about 2 years now. And for UX, I came from a non-traditional background as well. So from my undergrad until the end of my PhD, I primarily worked with environmental science research. I have had different work experience, from being an environmental analyst, working for a chemical industry in Brazil, to spending 4 years as a professor teaching environmental courses at one private university in Brazil during my PhD. And then when I finished my PhD, I knew that I wanted to keep challenging myself and gain knowledge in other fields. That's when I decided to come to Canada to study human-centered design. It allowed me to use my research skills and work on meaningful projects that could make a difference in people's lives. So I could learn about what they need and help improve not only products, but services as well. So that was my trajectory in UX so far. Okay, and now I want to give a little bit of an introduction about Macadamian. At Macadamian, healthcare is at the heart of everything we do. The healthcare solutions we design and develop are successful because we always put people at their center of our processes. But how do we ensure that our employees are able to deliver the highest level of quality to clients in general? Our employees at Macadamian are incredibly talented and passionate as well. We love to work with healthcare. And we're all connected by this shared desire to make healthcare better for everyone. And to ensure that we keep their drive high, we ensure that our employees are well taken care of. So a good client experience is only possible when employee experience is good. So we work hard to make sure that we continuously do so at Macadamian. In the last year at Macadamian, we were acquired by Image, and I don't know if you all know about that. But after that, we were scaling at a much faster pace than ever before. So we were hiring a lot more people than before, but also people were leaving us, and that's okay. It's part of the journey, right? So all of that while we were still in the middle of a pandemic, still adapting to the new ways of working in a remote setting. And up to this point, the HR team was able to hear the employee feedback and address it through some ad hoc conversations with employees from time to time. However, after this growth, this approach was not just scalable anymore. And there was this need to get a baseline understanding of our employee experience throughout their journey, which could act as a benchmark for future improvements and also help standardize our processes within different departments. So even though we had processes and policies that govern the overall employee journey, Macadamian needed, as Simran just mentioned, a better in-depth understanding of this overall employee experience through different stages of their tenure. So Simran and I, we went out and we did just that. We successfully created a gold standard for how to capture and document employee experience. Right, Simran?
Yes, absolutely. And we are going to be sharing all that with you today. So let's dive deeper into our case study. We will be sharing our approach, all the different steps we took and how we did that. We will also be providing a rationale behind why we did what we did, so that can hopefully guide you for similar initiatives in your organization as well. So kind of to get started, the first step basically is to kind of gather a team. So for us at Macadamian, it was a very interesting mix and I would say collaborative setup in a way that we were able to closely work together with the HR team. So we had the global HR team, global HR lead connect with the VP of experience, and they were talking through what approach they could take and what it could look like to capture information from employees in a much more structured way. And this kind of made perfect sense. Like there was like, it was very clear that why the HR should get to someone from VP of experience was because this was kind of like a typical research project, but the only difference being that we were doing research with employees instead of the end users of a product or service. They were users of the organization per se. So when the two leads met, they kind of decided to bring together our in-house research expertise. So two researchers, Yene and myself, were brought in to work closely with the HR team to kind of carry out this research. The HR kind of acted as a subject matter expert for us and kind of a stakeholder that we as researchers could rely on for support for research activities. So we had a close collaboration. And in terms of like the team, the key players in the team, the key members were the leadership team, specifically the VP of Experience, who advocated for this research with other stakeholders. They understood that employees are core for success of any organization. The research team and the design team too, like we kind of brought in our expertise from a research perspective. We helped make sense of the data. We translated the findings to internal stakeholders. The designers, specifically the graphic designers, helped create kind of these interactive journey maps that I'm excited to share with you as we proceed further with our presentation. And we had the subject matter expert, the HR team, who kind of helped support our research activities. And this team kind of met on a weekly cadence to kind of make sure that we are up to date on the progress of the project and make pivots as and when needed. And for us, it made sense to have kind of this kind of group because, I mean, the leadership or someone from that level we felt would be essential. And I feel like something that if and when you are kind of trying to do this work would be essential is like that first buy-in. I know that there were a lot of comments around the challenges around getting that buy-in. Having that one person from that leadership team or leadership group that's willing to advocate for you, getting their buy-in and having them advocate for your work can be a real key to spread this work across the organization. And that's something that worked really well for us at Macadamian. Obviously, you would want to have someone from the research and design team to bring that research expertise, because I mean, it may look like we're just going to employees and talking to them and capturing their feedback, but there's a method to our madness. There's processes and there's systems in place that we kind of take into account when we are doing our work to make sure that we capture and share the insights in an unbiased format, and so that it's actually truly actionable. So that expertise is really needed. And then having subject matter experts, be it HR or in certain cases for Macadamian, it's true that we also have project managers. So people who work really closely with the employees in general, because when we did this research, we didn't have the opportunity to go to like every single person out there, and we cannot talk to every individual. Whereas like the subject matter experts have a high touch point with a lot more employees. So having that group can also be very valuable when you're doing this kind of work.
Okay, so once we had our team set up, then we had to align the research goal with the business needs, right? That's very important. So the goal of our research was to really understand the employee journey in depth and map it out. So we had it defined since the beginning. This meant understanding, in our case, the 3 stages of the employee experience. So hiring and onboarding, the work tenure, and the offboarding. So having our goal of understanding this employee journey in the company at Macadamian, we had some questions that we needed to answer in order to create a journey map. So we had to first understand all the different phases of the journey according to the employee experience, because we wanted them to really feel that this was their journey. So we had to let them tell us their story. And other than that, to really gather everything that was necessary for an employee focused journey map, we needed to identify all the touch points and the interactions employees have and the pain points and feelings they experience within different stages of the journey. So having the research questions, as you can see here, really helped us to stay focused on the topic that we wanted to explore, since there was so much space for exploration. For example, during our research, we also navigated into the project journey, and we saw a space for future research, but then we were kind of, oops, but let's focus what we want to do now. We want to build the employee journey map, and that's what we're doing. So after defining the research goal and the project scope for this case, we built a research plan to provide context to the stakeholders involved and also keep track of the activities and help us, because since Simran mentioned, we were meeting on a weekly basis. So it did help us to discuss our weekly updates. So having a research plan in place helped us define how we would go about carrying out the research. And we also decided that we would conduct 3 sets of user interviews to understand the 3 different stages of the employee experience. And we decided on the deliverable to be 3 journey maps, where we would identify the different phases of each journey, highlighting the activities, what people were doing at those phases, the touch points, the thoughts, feelings, and pain points of the employees at each phase. Then we had to understand how we would capture the data, right, Simran?
Yeah, so once we had a plan in place, the next step was basically go ahead and execute that plan. And basically the first step was capturing the data. And to do that, we wanted to do interviews, and before going into the interviews, we wanted to make sure we had interview guides in place. So this is something, if you're not from a research background, is that before going into any sort of interview sessions, we create discussion guides to make sure that we know what we want to cover through our research when we are talking to the end users, in this case, the employees. So for all the 3 different stages of interest, we came up with 3 discussion guides. For the hiring and onboarding process, the focus was to kind of try and understand the application process and the interview experience in detail, as well as kind of get an understanding from employers in terms of how they felt about their overall onboarding experience, as well as what their first 2 weeks at the company looked like. For the work tenure stage, we focused on kind of ways to understand the employee experience on a more of a day-to-day basis. And we were discussing topics such as company culture, different rituals that are involved in performance management. Again, as Yene mentioned, working on project came up a lot, but we kind of scoped it down and kept only the pieces that were relevant to the employee experience as a part of our findings. But we also discovered through these interviews that being a part of future research process. And lastly, for the offboarding stage, the intent was to kind of discuss the challenges that the employees had been facing at the organization. Why did they decide to leave us? What were the reasons? And then looking at more logistical things like, what does their work towards the last few days look like? How do they transfer knowledge? And also getting their understanding of and perspective on the offboarding experience in the organization. So once we had the discussion guide, we kind of went ahead and did remote interviews with the users to kind of gather all the data. Both Yene and I were part of all the interviews, where we kind of switched between leading the conversation as well as the other person taking notes. At this point, I want to explain why we kind of decided to go the interview route and not any other method. sharing your experience at an organization can be a very personal experience, and we wanted to make sure that we got those individual perspectives, and we heard from those individuals in an authentic lens. And we also wanted to make sure we provide a safe space for all the employees to share their feedback. We made sure that we communicated that all the information that they're sharing with us is going to be kept confidential. And we wanted to make sure that we create an environment of trust where they could come in and be open and authentic about their experiences without feeling that this could impact them in any negative way. So that's the reason why we decided to do interviews. And in terms of the people we spoke to these three different groups. And hiring and onboarding, we had 6 participants who had been at the company for 1 to 3 months. Again, there were different levels from junior to senior, different departments, different locations. For work tenure, we wanted to make sure that we speak to people who have been at the company for a decent amount of time. So 2 years means that they have been through the review cycle at least twice to kind of get that perspective. So we have people from 2 to 14 years of experience, again, different levels, mostly senior folks in this case. Again, varied departments, varied locations. And for offboarding, we also wanted to speak to someone who had recently been offboarded, because, I mean, change is inevitable, and like we wanted to make sure that we capture more recent experiences. And that's why when we say that we want to continue doing this research, is because the processes change, the times change, the experiences change, and we want to make sure we capture the more recent experiences. So even in the offboarding case, we wanted to talk to someone who had been pretty recently offboarded, so in the first in 1 to 5 years time span, 5 months time span. And again, different levels, different departments and locations.
Okay, so after talking to all those individuals and finishing all the interviews, we had, I would say, a significant amount of data, about 16 hours of interviews. So then we had to start making sense of it, right? If we have some researchers here, as you know, we can use different methods for data analysis and synthesis. But still, since our end goal was to build a journey map, we decided, okay, let's start using Mirrorboard. And then we started an exercise doing an affinity map to really organize the information into different phases of the journey. We also wanted to organize the touch points, as I mentioned before, the thoughts, feelings, pain points, and opportunities that we could hear from the employees in each interviews, and then we could distribute and organize for each phase of the journey. So I want to show you one example of our synthesis process. For sure, we were a little bit messy before that, but as you can see here, the data was organized in a journey map format. And I understand that this process is not always easy, like the synthesis and even like put it in a journey map format, because some phases of the journey are not very clear, let's say like that, at the beginning of your synthesis. So, and we knew that. So, and because of that, we were flexible in our approach. And when we kept in mind that it was a process, and then we could add, remove, or edit the phase of the journey at any time during our synthesis. So this was like a very important, and I would recommend people to be like flexible. And about the number of people that we interview, it was representative. And from the information that we got from them, we could build a journey map with all the details, but we wanted to involve them a little bit more in the co-creation process and help us validate the journey maps that we were building. And also we needed to bring to the team the subject matter expert from HR and to help us to really understand what was happening in the background. So that's when we plan a journey mapping session. And Simran mentioned before that our HR team and the project managers, they do interact with employees multiple times in their journey, and they have this broad perspective on what the employee experience looks like throughout all the stages, even though they didn't have that like a clear picture of the journey in the company. So it was something very important to bring them to those sessions. So taking into consideration, we decided to bring those SMEs for the journey mapping sessions, where we wanted them to really put themselves in the shoes of the employee and map the journeys for the three stages: the hiring, onboarding, work tenure, and offboarding. So to help that, I just like to give you a little bit of context. Each journey mapping session, we share the synthesized data with the team, but not in a journey map format, because we didn't want them to come to the meeting already, oh, okay, the journey map, it's done and that's it, we're just validating. No, we wanted to co-create with them. So once we finished the journey mapping sessions and had all the data organized, again, we synthesized the information by considering everything that we had discovered before, and the interviews that we had done, the journey mapping sessions with the SMEs, and based on that, we could really develop the final three journey maps. And then it was a time for us to document the insights. So that was the time when we had to stop and think, okay, how we're documenting our insights to share with the stakeholders. We had all the information synthesized, but it was crucial to reflect on the best way people would consume that, would consume the information we were going to share. We wanted people to understand and see themselves reflected in the research. And we know people could just go and explore the journey map by themselves, but we wanted to provide the information in a way that everyone could quickly assimilate, comprehend what we were trying to say. And that's when Simran and I were discussing, and then we decided, okay, let's use storytelling to explain the entire journey to the employees. Okay, and storytelling was fundamental to share the employee narrative and to build empathy. So now will be a part of the presentation where we want to share the story. We'll start with a story of someone that even before searching for a job. So, okay, let's give you a little bit of context about this person. Meet Maya Brown. Her passion to solve human problems through innovative design approach led her to pursue a career in UX design. Right after she graduated, she started working as a freelancer design in order to get experience in the field. And over the span of 5 years, she got to work with different kinds of clients in different domains. And although the clients varied, majority of them were from the game industry. That experience allowed her to not only grow her skills as a designer, but also build a specialty in game design. She has really enjoyed working in that space. However, now she feels that she's reaching a plateau. She has a desire to work in a completely new domain with a group of experts that she can learn from and build relationships with. She is unsure if there exists something like that out there, but she started looking for full-time opportunities. Maya marks herself available for work on LinkedIn, and soon she's reached out by a recruiter from Macadamian. She finds herself interested in the position, and she decides to chat further with the recruiter. Overall, she has had a wonderful experience learning about Macadamian and the role, and she found everyone open and welcoming. She cannot believe that what seemed like a dream a few weeks ago is now turning into reality. She's excited about this opportunity. The next part of the story is, after a couple of years working for Macadamia, Maya is now a senior interaction designer. She's pretty comfortable at work, knows everyone, and really likes the people she works with. She feels that she has reached a strong and stable position in her career and is contributing to the team's growth. She has also had some changes in her personal life. She now has a child at home, and her family just moved to Calgary. It's a different province here in Canada. So even though she appreciates the close relationship with her team, she had been working remotely even before the move, and this big change hasn't impacted her work or the relationship she has with her colleagues. After moving to Calgary, she took some time off to get everything in place because she values a balance between her personal and professional life. Now that she's settled, she feels ready to go back to work. And this big change in her life made Maya reflect on her career and goals. As she starts thinking about her annual goals, she starts to wonder what Macadamian can offer to her and set her goals. Every quarter, Maya has to work on the performance review. During this time, she reflects on her accomplishments and goals. Then she gets ready to discuss her progress with the manager and gets feedback. Besides that, the feedback she receives from her peers is valuable to her professional development as well. Even though some of the goals were not achieved, she feels she's doing a good job.
Awesome. So now Maya has reached another stage in her journey. At this point, she's been working at Macadamian for 5 years. She's recently went through her yearly review with her manager, and she's had the time to reflect kind of not only what she'd accomplished over the past year, but also throughout her time at Macadamian overall in the last 5 years. And she's grown a lot. Today, she's a UX design lead. And over the years, she had worked on multiple projects, leading quite a lot of those, and also had the opportunity to mentor other designers as well. And she credits her achievements to not only the work that she has put in, but also the amazing talented people that she has gotten to work with and learn from during her time so far. She does not, however, she's reached a point now where she does not feel challenged in her work. And she's also finding it hard to find time for her personal life. And also working in healthcare now is not exciting to her anymore. She's been thinking about chatting with her manager about how she's been doing lately. And as Yene was mentioning, we were acquired. So with all the changes in the organization, and she's also seeing some of the colleagues leaving, and she feels that it's time for her to make a move as well. She starts looking for opportunities elsewhere. And once she gets one, she decides to reach to her manager, then they meet for a one-on-one chat. She communicates that she's decided to move on to a new opportunity, and they decide on a notice period, and the manager starts informing the colleagues about her decision. And over the course of a month, she continues to work on the project, transfers her tasks and knowledge, and documents everything and provides guidance. And in the last week or so, she goes through the offboarding process. So we kind of created this story as a way, as a precursor to the journeys that we developed. We wanted to use these stories as a hook to pull people into these journeys. And if you have seen journey maps in the past, I know a lot of folks were mentioning that they had the opportunity to build journey maps quite a bit in the past. They can be really broad and overwhelming to process and take in. And we wanted to make sure that we had an approach where we use storytelling to pull people in. And the next thing that we did to make sure that we could make these journey maps kind of easy to understand, reduce the cognitive load, while at the same time making sure that we put and leave in all the content, was to make these journey maps interactive. So we will be sharing this presentation PDF with you so that you can zoom in onto this, but I'll speak to a few elements here in these 3 journey maps that we created. So we had all the phases on top here. We had what people were doing, the different touch points, pain points, thinking and feeling. And we had high-level cards in terms of what was happening in that phase. And if you click on it, it could expand into a much more detailed information here. The touch points were divided into different people that they were interacting with and different things that they were interacting with. The pain points itself were also these individual cards here that one could click on to go to a different card if you were like diving deeper into a specific phase of a journey. And same with the feelings and pain points. They were high-level feelings and pain points, but if you click on the plus sign, it'll open up into a more detailed kind of explanation of what that feeling was at this stage. And again, so we were trying really to make sure that it's really easy to understand. You can look at things at a high level and then interact with the journey map itself to go deeper. So yeah, once we had captured all this information, we had our journey maps created. The next and the final stage was basically to share this with everyone. And the kind of goal of our report was basically to not only share findings and the methods used with our stakeholders of the leadership team, but also to use this as an opportunity to kind of do ideation sessions with them so that we could identify opportunities to improve the different pain points we had identified. So we had a high-level structure of a report where we kind of gave an introduction, the way we are sharing everything today with you right now. We had a high-level explanation of the research goal, research methods, who we spoke to, what the process kind of looked like, sharing the whole story, and kind of sharing what we want to do with this information. So that kind of acted as a precursor for our ideation sessions. And obviously, keeping things confidential, I cannot share all the kind of findings from the research, but I do want to share some positive findings. We did learn that we do have a good process in place and it works. Yes, there are things that could be improved, but the process itself is not broken. We also heard that employees were really kind of highly satisfied with their work at Macadamian, and that kind of satisfaction came from working with really like skilled people that they got to collaborate with. And this brings me to the third finding, which was collaborative work culture. Like, I think that's something that was really appreciated by the employees at Macadamian, that they got to work with others and they had the opportunity to collaborate with each other.
Okay, so when we were done with the report, we were not done with the work, as Simran just mentioned. We shared this report with the leadership, and then this was the beginning of the co-creation process. So now let's share a little bit about the ideation process and the sessions we had, and what we learned, and point out some of the opportunities for improvement. So let's discuss about the ideation sessions. So at first, we conducted a workshop with the leadership at Macadamian because we wanted to discuss the employee journey, present the pain points that we've identified, and ideate together to really understand where we could find space for improvements. At that moment, the leads from UX, digital experience, HR, recruitment, laboratory, they were present in that session. And how did we structure? So first, we discussed the journey in more detail. We had already provided the report, but we wanted to explore it in more detail. So we presented, and then we also shared the user story that we storytell to them as well. So the onboarding, work tenure, and offboarding, as we did today. Then at the same workshop session, we collaborated on discussing opportunities, but it didn't end like that. After that ideation session, we collaborate asynchronously. So we asked them to revisit the journeys and brainstorm any ideas they might have for each of the journeys and different phases. At this moment, during those synchronous and asynchronous activities, we didn't want to disregard any ideas that didn't seem feasible, let's say. We just wanted to hear different possibilities to solve the key user pain points that we have had identified. And as a result, we got a collection of opportunities that would be further shared with the different company stakeholders. And it was just like, it's so good to hear from them and see the view of someone from outside. Okay, so to provide a better context of what happened during this workshop, and actually the one session that we have, and then the asynchronous activities. So we wanted to share and present here today what we did and how we did. So we used Miro. And we started the meeting with a research overview, reviewing the journey maps and answering questions that they already might have just based on the report. And we provided some instructions. So from that point, we explained how the sessions would work and how they would navigate on the Miro board. So after you can watch the recordings and read the instructions that we provide. So the focus of the meeting was at that meeting, the onboarding journey. So people could add as many ideas as they wanted, even if they were not directly or indirectly involved in any of the processes we found the pain points. We just wanted them to take a look on the pain point, and then if they had anything to contribute, it was welcome. So we believe that this really made people open up significantly, because they didn't have any constraints in mind, because they were not fully aware of the processes that were happening in the background. So they were just adding their ideas. And we incentivize people to support each other's ideas. So, okay, if you like that, put a thumbs up, or speak up if you think that we should do it in a different way. And if they had any questions or concerns as well, we had a lot of discussions during that meeting. And after that session, the stakeholders, they had 2 weeks to come up with opportunities for the other journeys. So the work tenure and offboarding that we didn't explore at that moment. So by the end of the first week, we had a 1 hour meeting that we called office hours. So anyone could just jump in, and then we could discuss anything, answer any questions, and discuss the pain points if they wanted more explanation. So, but they had their moment to go and explore asynchronously. So I want just to clarify why we decided to do some asynchronous activities. And the reason was because we understand that the leadership has busy schedules. The project was a priority for them, but still we're working on a remote setting right now. And we have people from different locations at this moment. And we consider that this was the best approach. So one thing that we did to facilitate the discussions was to create a Slack channel where everyone could share their ideas, ask questions, or schedule a call, a quick chat if they wanted to know anything specific.
Yeah, so the whole idea of doing this asynchronously, as Yene mentioned, was basically to make sure that people have the time and that they need, especially as I was mentioning previously, that these journey maps can be very detailed. So we wanted to make sure that they had the time to go back into it and don't feel pressured to come up with all the ideas in the session that we did with them and in that moment. So after we kind of had collected all the ideas from the leadership team, the next step was basically to put that all together. And as we were going through the process of like putting the ideas together, we identified that there were different groups that were more or less responsible for different areas of the journey. So we identified like the HR team, the recruitment team, the management group, the IT group, as like the kind of four key areas, and then obviously the employers themselves. It's about them. So then them being one of the fifth more important key area. But the idea was then to kind of go ahead and start sharing this information with these groups and make sure that they are a part of the process. So our approach was really about involving the right groups at the right time. So we started with the leadership group, shared our perspective with them, got the buy-in from them, and then the next step was like, okay, now we need to go to the HR and recruitment group. So we went ahead and did a similar activity where we kind of shared just the things that we had heard related to the onboarding and the recruitment related processes, as well as anything that HR is involved in, and get them to ideate with us in a similar fashion that we did with the leadership group. After that, we went ahead and shared the findings and the insights with the management group. We had a meeting with the IT group. So we were really trying to get everyone involved in the process and help us with the approach towards solving for these pain points. And we came up with a lot of exciting new ideas through this process of getting everyone involved through this. And once we kind of had all the information, as I mentioned, the fifth group being the employees, we wanted to make sure that we make them a part of this work as well. So after we had done all this work, after we had ideated everything, we went back to the employees. Yene and I had the opportunity to go to the global meetup, which is a monthly meetup we have with the entire organization, and we presented our work with them. And then we kind of also made this a part of the process of the onboarding, orientation, and training. The idea was to really communicate that at the end of the day, this is about the employees. So the HR team went ahead and created something called Employee Journey 101, which was a part of the onboarding materials that was added for the new employees joining us. The presentation that Yene and I had done at the global meetup also became a part of the onboarding process, where they had the opportunity to watch the work that we had done and kind of come back to us and add to it if they wanted. And lastly, something that is done at Macadamian is around authentic conversation workshops. We have this process of using nonviolent conversations and nonviolent communication using the observations, feelings, needs, and request method that everyone is trained on, and the employee journeys became a part of that as well. I just want to be mindful of the time and quickly share the impact. Yene and I are happy to stay a bit longer to answer your questions as well, if you can stay. But really quickly, so all the work that we did had some really impactful changes. I kind of did see a question in the chat around the milestones. It was basically as we had shared everything with everyone was really excited about what was done so far. So we kind of now were taking all the findings and figuring out how to improve the hiring and onboarding process, work tenure, and as well as offboarding process. So all the ideas that were generated eventually became the part of goals set up for the HR team. Like they had their goals. The management team had their goals based on our findings, and this is something that they're working towards implementing in the next quarter. They are already implementing and working towards these goals to improve the employee experience. And And in terms of how we are measuring it, for example, for the hiring and onboarding process, we've implemented onboarding surveys with the employees at this point. We have improved our onboarding checklist based on our findings. For the work tenure, there are talks around having, I would say, stay interviews with the employees to continue gathering that information. And there's more check-in that employees have with the manager. The managers, we have communicated with the employees that they have the agency. So the employees are willing to share more direct feedback with their managers. And similarly for offboarding, we have made changes to the exit interviews, and we have also implemented an offboarding survey through the process. I'll allow Yene to kind of conclude our presentation, and we're open for questions after.
Yes, so and just to wrap up, this is a work in progress. The employee journey research needs to be periodically revisited. So we know that the journey is dynamic and it evolves throughout time. So that's why we need to use like some methods and instruments to collect feedback from people. Our hope is to really replicate and validate our efforts towards the improving employee experience. So this will help us to identify any new opportunities for improvements and any new pain points, to check if we did solve the problems that we had previously. And just so you know what we're doing to continually gather data, Macadamian team now it's using different research methods such as surveys, interviews, working sessions. The goal is to really, as I mentioned, is to assess if a previous pain points have been addressed and mitigated, and if we have something else to address and discuss, and any new opportunities for improvement. So we wanted to share what we did and what were the key steps that you might need to follow to build an employee journey map. But the most important message that we want to give to everyone is that this is about the employee, right? The employee journey and their experience in the company. So something that we share with everyone at Macadamian is that everyone has agency, so they can speak up, they can be part of it. And in these times of change, when the industry is shifting to a new way of working, and because of that, it's really important to understand the employees' needs, and catering to them, it's more important than ever. And if you fall behind, you ended up losing some incredible talent. So that's what we wanted to share with everyone here today. We're on time, so thank you very much. We do appreciate everyone taking the time to be here today. And at any time, if you have any questions or just want to chat about employee experience research, please feel free to reach out to either Simran or me through email or LinkedIn. Thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome. Yene, Simran, thank you so much for such a detailed case overview. And I really love the story you shared about the employee going through all those stages. It's really relatable. And I think that everyone kind of felt, the struggles, the lows, the ups of the whole thing. So thank you so much for presenting such a case. And I'm sharing the links to the LinkedIn right now so that you can make sure to stay in touch with both Yene and Simran, and the chat here is flowing with questions. We're a bit over time, so don't worry. If you have to run, please do. We might as well take a few more minutes to answer some of the questions, because I saw some of them already answered because Yene and Simran were taking a pic at the chat here, I believe. Yeah, and also some of them were covered during the presentation at the very last moments, but we have so many questions being repeated, so let's just get straight into it, and you will get the recording as mentioned, so no worries. So the question here is from Brittany. Did you create personas such as tenure-based, location-based, role-based? And if yes, how did you decide what was the right segmentation for them?
Go ahead, Yene.
I was just going to mention like at what phase we created a persona, but not like a very detailed one. And it was just for actually support us developing our research. So we created like a very simple persona right before we started doing the journey mapping sessions, because we wanted to provide that context to the individuals that were going to be there building that journey with us. So as we mentioned during the presentation, we shared the synthesis with them. And then we also shared this persona so they could understand, okay, this is the amalgamation of all the individuals that we talked. So, and then we were trying to represent them into a single persona, but we didn't create multiple personas based on different locations, roles and things like that. It was just like a one single persona for each of the journeys. For example, the onboarding, the work tenure, and the offboarding. And as we mentioned, this was just like a part of the exercise, the journey mapping session. Do you want to comment?
I think, yeah, something that I also want to add is like, I think we had a back and forth conversation around whether we should create personas or not. And like, I think creating employer persona can be a risky process, because you hire employees for their unique like talents that they bring to the team. And especially at a size that we were at Macadamian, we wouldn't have been able to create a persona that justified every single employee and every single employee could talk to and relate to. And we didn't want the persona to become like a factor in the sense that people say that, oh, this is not me, I don't relate to that, this is not my experience that you're talking about. In fact, when we shared the story with the employees too, as at a global level, there were people from the engineering group that came to us and said that, well, this might not be fully reflective of an experience from a UX, like from an engineering perspective, because we used the UX title and we had to share the fact that, oh, we did speak to engineering folks as well. It's just that we used UX as a title to kind of explain and navigate people through that journey, through that user narrative. So I think it completely depends on the size of the organization. I would say if you have a really large organization and you're getting the right group, I would say go ahead and build personas. But if you're in a smaller organization, stay away from building personas, because that might not be fully representative of the employee that is actually going to be then looking at that artifact and saying that, oh, this is not really me. And as Yene said, that having the persona to help with the journey mapping process is what we did. We wanted to have a persona so that the people who are part of the journey mapping process can actually understand whose journey they are building.
Great, thank you so much, Brittany. I hope that really helps. We have another question here from, let me find the question. I just lost it. Terrell here. Simran, you were showing the synthesis grid. Could you please share what were the names of the roles there?
Oh, in the synthesis grid, let me go back to the presentation, and I think I can share my screen as well. Okay. Let me share my screen. Yeah, I know I did see a comment that this was fairly this was difficult to read. Again, hopefully the PDF that we share is going to make it easy for you to read. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do was we're just trying to make sense of information here. So we were trying to identify different phases, and this is something that you look at the journey, at a work tenure journey, where we were looking at things and we're like, okay, there are certain activities that happen on a more weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, such as like team meetings or like weekly check-ins or bi-weekly check-ins with the team members. So we captured it that way. And then there are certain things that happen on a more of a monthly basis. So at Macadamian, there's global meetups or like team meetings that a Romanian or Armenian team has. Then there's things like that happen on a quarterly basis, such as performance reviews or something called Creativity Day that we have at Macadamian. Then similarly things that happen yearly, and then there were certain things happening aperiodically. So what we're basically trying to do here is like trying to kind of identify what are the different phases of the journey and what's the best way to structure that. And we had a lot of back and forth to figure out what's the best way to kind of represent the work tenure journey specifically, because a lot of things happen in parallel. But over here, we're just trying to make sense and organize the information in that way. And on the left-hand side, we just are like have the traditional things that a journey map has. So what are the people doing? What's working well? What are the different touch points for people and things? What are the different pain points? With the feelings are captured here as well, like thinking and feeling. And in the very end, the different opportunities that came from our users that we also incorporated in our final report that we had was like how to solve for these pain points. So that's what we had mapped out. And again, as Yene was mentioning, because the end goal was to kind of create a journey map, we used kind of a similar template through our synthesis process as well. Obviously, this was a later step in the process. The first process before this was to actually get all the information on the Miro board, and for us was to actually go through the interviews and map out individual user journeys, and then take all that information to synthesize a complete full-on journey of what the journey looks like for this specific phase and this specific group of users. And then on top of that, we layered the journeys that we had created with our subject matter experts. So there was like basically going from individual user journeys to a synthesized journey from the research, then mapping on top of that the journey we had created with subject matter experts to come and create the final user journeys.
And as we mentioned during the presentation, sometimes the phases you won't be able to map it out on like analyzing the first interview, for example. For the work tenure, it was not something that we could say, okay, this is happening in this sequential order. As you can see, it's not sequential, and there are things that they don't have like a one periodicity. So we just wanted to, group things together. And that's why this is not like even the final journey map. As I mentioned, this was like a synthesis process. And that's why we even have like those two columns about the company. That's not is not about like a one phase of the journey. It's about, okay, we heard that and we think that's important to share this in our report. Okay, so let's organize, let's group this information together. So that's like a one advice that we could give. It's just like a try first, like to do an affinity map exercise to group the information together. And then as you go, as you are analyzing all the interviews, the phases, they will come, and you might have like a different phases for your journey, for example.
Yeah. And there's a follow-up question in the chat. I just want to clarify, like the different columns were like doing. The first one is doing. The second one is what's working well. The third one is touch point for people. Next one is, I guess we also had touch point for things incorporated in that, both touch point for people and things. The next one is thinking and feelings. So what are they thinking? What are their thoughts? What are their feelings? The next one is pain points. And the last one is opportunities that came up through research.
Great, thank you so much for sharing it so detailedly. More questions coming in. This one is from Victoria. We're talking about different kinds of maps at the very beginning. Some people have never built employee journey maps. Some people have just built process maps. So Victoria here asks, is there a preferred sequence for creating such artifacts? That is, should you start with customer journey, then process, employee journey, service blueprint? What's your take on it?
I think how I think about this is like basically doing what makes most sense for the project. Like when you're thinking of artifacts in general, you would want to create artifacts that justify and represent your research in the best way possible. And then whether people understand or not, that's a different challenge in itself. And that's something that you would want to work towards doing facilitation with them. So for example, when we were doing journey mapping sessions with the subject matter experts, the part of the session was actually educating them what a journey map is. Why do we create a journey map? What does different phases mean? What does like the different like columns and swim lanes mean? And irrespective of whatever artifact you want to create with your stakeholders, there will always be an element of education there, because you are the expert in that space and your stakeholder won't really know what that artifact is about and why we are creating that artifact. Even with our clients, when we do these sessions, like I've been on service blueprint sessions with clients, the part of the session is explaining to them why we are creating and how we are doing that, and then facilitating the conversation in a way that we are able to capture all the information that we need. So sometimes after that educational component is completed, you would have stakeholders that, okay, understand everything and they're putting everything in there on their own. And then there are stakeholders where they're like, oh, I'm just going to speak. So that's why you have to have a team that just is able to capture everything and put everything in the artifact that you're creating. But I would never think of creating an artifact just because of the level of competency my stakeholders would have. I'd create the artifact that is needed for the research that I'm doing. And in this case, we were creating a journey. So we just did that.
Yeah, as I agree. And I would like to mention, you have to first think about like, what is your end goal? And then think about the artifacts, because you shouldn't be thinking, okay, should I do a service design blueprint or a journey map? What do you want to do with that? Who will be looking at that type of information? What do you want to share? What type of data you'll be collecting? So first of all, like, define what's your goal and discuss that with the stakeholders. Then assess what are the artifacts that you could build to really share the results and your data with everyone and with the stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you. It's all about the goal in the first place, just realizing what you want to do and then why you want to do that. And then you choose like the instrument you need to use for that.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So this question probably refers to the very beginning when we asked, like, what's the biggest challenge? So many people mentioned how it's difficult to sell such an initiative to internal stakeholders, to actually show that, hey, there is value in improving employee experience, prioritizing it, not only focusing on customer experience. And Brittany here asks, was getting leadership buy-in part of your experience, or was that already established? Do you have any advice on what helped leadership to prioritize this particular work?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that buy-in was in our case, and I can also speak to when we don't have any buy-in at all. But in this case, so the VP of experience was a part of the team, and they knew how important this work was, and they were evangelizing this with the key stakeholders, the rest of the stakeholders in the company. And we definitely had a stepped approach. It was very strategic that, okay, once we finish our research, we're going to go to the key leadership group and do a session with them. And they are part of the co-creation activity so that they can kind of see and understand that, oh, these are some really important pain points that the employees are experiencing that we need to work towards fixing. And once you have that high leadership buy-in, then we moved on to individual groups where we worked with HR, we worked with IT, we worked with the management group. And then once we had done that, we shared this whole thing with the employees overall. And then got them involved in the process. Now Yene is constantly reached out by different employees in the organization to kind of provide feedback. Not only that, Yene and I have been in meetings where we have shared this work now with Emids, the company that acquired us, and we are trying to now show the value of this work and communicate the value with them. So I would say that it's always going to be, those challenges are always going to be there. Like, not all stakeholders will see the value at the first glance. So I would say, like, finding the first stakeholder, finding that one stakeholder that feels and sees the value, start that conversation there, start that communication with them there. And it doesn't even have to be this elaborate study. Like, obviously, I understand that Macadamian is a consulting firm with a high UX maturity. So there's obviously buy-in for UX work. And that's why we were able to do 3 journey maps in like one research study, but sometimes you might not have the opportunity to do that. So pick the process that's most broken or needs to be most fixed. For example, say your onboarding process is broken. So do the research in that space and just create an onboarding journey. And that also doesn't have to be like, I would say, doesn't have to preface with the idea that you're creating a journey. Sometimes When we work with clients at times, they're like, oh, we just want foundational research just to identify the pain points and improve the and inform the next iteration of our product. We go ahead and do foundational research with those stakeholders as well. So as you're just having those initial interactions to identify those tactical pain points, you can ask more broader questions. And there are times when a journey map is not something that's promised to the client, but we end up creating one for them and then helping them see the value of this kind of work. And I've been in numerous presentations with clients when they come to us and they're like, oh, wow, they see the journey map and they're like, oh, this is really valuable. This is really helpful for us. Can we get a copy of that? So that helps get that buy-in as well. So start with where you can and try to incorporate any sort of journey mapping work in your any kind of research that you're doing. As you were saying, like if you've started with process mapping, you can map out that process and then point out those loopholes in that process and then start like pointing that out to your stakeholders. Like, okay, we really need to understand this specific stage of the process, and that's how you can eventually create the journey too. So it doesn't have to be one research study. It could be an iterative research process to build your journey map.
Yeah, and we were very lucky that our VP of user experience was evangelizing this work even before we joined Macadamian. So the field was already pre-prepared for that, but something that I would recommend is justify, because we have presented this about the employee journey so many times. And most of the time, yes, people love it. They want to replicate, but some people, they ask, but why? And then we answer, and then, but why? So first justify, think about like, why would you be doing this at your company? What value do you think this would bring? You have to have like a solid justification for that to make people really get involved and make the company, you know, invest time and money on that initiative as well.
And as Yene said, that we shared it multiple times, that was the part of the process of getting the buy-in. We know that we cannot expect the leadership and the stakeholder to buy into our work just by sharing it once with them. Like I've been in situations where research has been, and this is a broader challenge with research in general, is like to get buy-in, you wouldn't want to just share your findings once and then just move on and then no one reads it. Any opportunity where you can find where questions come up that refer to your past research, go back and pull that research out and tell people you already have these answers and you already did this work and this is what it looks like. Is this helpful to help you make your decision that you're trying to make? So try to pull back and leverage the research that has already been done in the past to kind of also get that buy-in from your stakeholders.
That's so refreshing, and I'm so happy that you initially had this support. And thank you so much for sharing, you know, tips on how to actually like push this idea to your stakeholders and show them the value. I think it's extremely important, and fingers crossed some of people left here will actually use this tips to implement such projects at their organizations, because as I saw upon entering the session, so many people just never thought of it, and some struggled with just doing it in the company. So I really hope that this will help. All right, so we have a bit more time for 2 more questions here. This one is from Terrell. Regarding goals of a mapping initiative, what are the 2 or 3 most common goals you have worked with, such as increase employee fulfillment in their work, or maybe some others that you worked with? Could you share?
So I think like our end goal before and after doing this exercise is really to improve employee experience, because Macadamian does care about that. We want people to be satisfied at work and give their best. So I think this was like something very important, like a piece that we're still discussing all the time. But we also, our goal was, as we mentioned in the beginning, was to really understand what is the employee journey in the company. Okay, and to treat the full journey as something very organic, because I feel that most companies, they don't touch on the last part of offboarding because, okay, they want to keep the employees. I know we do too, but we understand it, it's a part of a cycle, and people join, people leave, and we have to treat it as something organic that might happen. And we want to make sure that everyone would have an amazing experience in all the phases and the onboarding until they offboarding, until they when they decide to leave the company.
And I think something I want to add to that is that for us specifically, again, with us being acquired, we had the bandwidth to do this kind of work. And there was always a conversation around creating this baseline understanding of the employees. So once we had that buy-in, we were able to pursue this goal of understanding the employee journey and create that benchmark understanding. Obviously, that might not always be the case for different organizations. So I think sometimes goals can look from what's basically happening in the organization, why there's a need to kind of do employee experience research in the first place. So for example, especially with COVID, I feel like a lot of companies have seen a higher attrition rate. There's an increase in that, and a kind of like that could be the precursor as to ask like your stakeholders there, like, why do you think that's happening? Is the data that we are capturing answering that question? If not, let's go do some research and understand that offboarding experience and maybe map out that offboarding journey. And that's some of the things that could inform your goals as well in terms of what's happening in your organization and which part is basically broken or which part you want to have the most impact at. But again, as Yene said, for us, again, because Macadamian has that higher UX maturity, we knew the value of this work and we wanted to build this baseline understanding from not the fact that, oh, something is broken, we want to fix it. We know something that works, we want to make it better. Because if we don't continue working towards that, someone else is eventually going to take our employees. So I think that's the driver behind this work.
Really love this care attitude. Thank you so much for sharing. And Terrell here says beautiful response, improve the employee experience. Great. Okay, and we have the last question for today, I think, and this one is from Rian. Do you have any tips to encourage discussion in the ideation sessions?
I think first, you have to provide context, right? I think people, when they have context, they engage because they know about the subject and they can collaborate. Another thing is you also have to speak up and maybe ask questions, even questions to yourself, and then someone like might answer and then start a discussion in the room. Because we do know there are people that are more quiet, people that are more talkative, and that's okay. You have to respect the way people are, but if you can incentivize a little bit, asking those type of questions, providing the context as I mentioned. So, and even preparing them beforehand. So sending materials so they feel that they have like a fully an understand of what will be discussed during that session, so they can come prepared. I think that's a good point.
And going back to the facilitation piece, I think the first thing, someone's going to speak up and share their ideas when they care about something. And the whole idea of us creating that journey, that user narrative, that story, was to help people feel what an employee goes through as they're going through that entire experience of from hiring and onboarding to offboarding. And that was a way of pulling them in the ideation process. So that was the first step for us. And the other thing is that as Yene was mentioning, prompt the users, prompt them. It's like, okay, we had set up a board a certain way, we had prepared everything, we had all the pain points in there. And we would be like, okay, we are not seeing anything for this specific one. Do you have any ideas? Can anyone go there and put in their ideas there? So prompt them. And the other thing, and this is the biggest thing, I feel like during facilitation, and me being an introvert, I'm personally very comfortable with, but sometimes people who are more extrovert are not comfortable with silence. I would say be comfortable with silence, because silence just means that you have a lot of information on your board. People are reading through that, processing that, and thinking about it. It doesn't mean something is wrong. If in the next 5, 7, 10 minutes, you start seeing people actually going in there and typing things out, it means it's working. And the other thing with silence as a facilitator is that it makes things a little awkward for your audience. So they feel the need to fill the silence and they would eventually speak up. So try not to fill the silence yourself, so that your kind of audience or the people that you're doing the ideation session with feel like, oh, they need to speak up because this is getting awkward. So it's something that I tend to use a lot as well in the way I facilitate.
I'm not sure whether I have anything to add to that, enjoying the silence here. So with that, Yene, Simran, thank you so much for such in-depth responses. It's really valuable to see people who care. It's so great to have such an example of a Macadamian company that really values and prioritizes the whole employee journey, employee experience within, not only caring about customers, but also prioritizing. Sorry, I'm just losing. I'm at loss of words at this point, I guess. Yeah, so thank you so much. It's such an amazing case. It's so refreshing to see companies really caring about employees, just sharing this vision and trying to share it with others to help them as well. If you want to see more events like this, make sure to check the upcoming ones at expressia.eventbrite.com or check the recordings we've got on this channel. Take care, and I will see you around.